Illinois versus Purdue for the Cannon crossover episode. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into a fun crossover episode of Locked On Boilermakers and Locked On Illini. I've got host of Locked On Illini, Sonny Verma, on the show. Sonny, how are you doing today? How are you feeling about your Illinois Illini?
You know, I feel a lot better than I did last week, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. But you know what? It's just nice we're at a place now where Illinois is sitting at 4-1, and the second half of the schedule is going to get a lot easier than the first half has been. But we're not done yet. So we have a big game against Saturday that many are dubbing as a potential trap game. I don't think it's going to be the case, but I'll tell you why in a minute.
Yeah, so you brought it up. You hit on that point. It's potentially a trap game. A lot of people say that because after Indiana, you guys don't perform against Indiana at all. Going against USC, that's an emotional victory for Illinois. And then going into Purdue, there's reason to believe, hey, maybe they underestimate the Boilermakers a little bit, especially when you put in the factor that they take on the Buckeyes, the number one team in the nation, the following week. So it puts Illinois in an interesting position where this is the stereotypical trap game. They open up as 7.5-point favorites. That line has jumped up a little bit for Illinois right now, but this is, in my opinion, the stereotypical upset game. Sonny, do you think that Illinois is strong enough? Do you think that they've bounced back? Do you think that there's enough togetherness throughout that team to go into Ross-Ade and really perform against Purdue?
Nick, I really do. I think what your logic absolutely makes sense. But if you look at the context between this Purdue and Illinois rivalry, Purdue has won 15 out of 20. Since Brett Bielema has taken over, Illinois, I hope I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, has been on their way up, whereas Purdue struggled the last couple of years. And yet, Brett Bielema's 1-3 against Purdue since he's taken over at Illinois. Obviously, you guys cost us an opportunity to go to a Big Ten West championship, or winning the Big Ten West to go to the Big Ten championship a couple of seasons ago. I think that there's too much riding on this game, and I think that Brett Bielema, in his previous instances in the SEC, who he's coached against Barry Odom, I think he knows Barry is a very rock-solid coach. He knows we're going to need this game. And I think that, that drubbing that we took in Bloomington a couple weeks ago kind of opened up a lot of eyes that we can't really sleepwalk through a team anymore, and much less sleepwalk through a team who has won the last two times Illinois has gone to Ross-Ade Field. Purdue has come out victorious. And so I just think that I would understand the idea of a trap game, but I just don't think Purdue can be that trap game, because generally trap games are teams that you do very well against and that you kind of start overlooking. Purdue has had our number for the most part, and so I don't think they qualify.
So you talk about it under Bielema. You guys are 1-3 against Purdue. That one win comes last year against a Purdue team that was 1-11 against Ryan Walters. But that was Ryan Brown's kind of debut. That was his debut as the starter. He's really picked up the reins for Purdue this year and broken out as that guy. But last year, relatively unknown redshirt freshman, he jumps in 297 passing yards in that one, gets it done on the ground, and he takes you guys to overtime. A very good Illinois team, not a great Purdue team by any means, but he takes y'all to overtime. Questionable fumble call, kind of the difference there. We won't get into it, but anyways, Illinois, they win that one 50-49. But a lot of people say, hey, if Purdue, they were able to compete in that one, if they were able to take that Illinois team to 49-50 when you're 1-11 on the season, well, this is an improved Purdue team. This is a Purdue team that put 30 points up on Notre Dame. This is a Purdue team that is coming off their bye week, has a refreshed defense. Why can't this Purdue team compete or maybe even take down Illinois?
I mean, I'm not going to argue otherwise. I'm simply not going to be sitting here saying that I'm overlooking Purdue in any stretch of the imagination either. I think you've definitely upgraded at head coach. I do think the Ryan Brown situation is going to be a little bit different now that there's actual tape on Ryan Brown, whereas last year he kind of came out of nowhere and he had the game of his life. And quite honestly, Ryan Walters had the coaching job of his life last year in that game as well, coaching both the offense and the defense. It's just one of those where I go back to what I was talking about in the beginning. Rivalries are just different. It usually doesn't matter even if one team is really good and one team is kind of struggling or rebuilding. In rivalry games, I think you can just kind of throw that out the window. And I think that's going to be the case on Saturday. But, just to answer your point, Illinois is arguably better than last year as well. We brought back that offensive line who is all progressively 1 year older, has one more year of experience. Yeah, they've been struggling through the first 4 weeks, but you know what? They rebounded huge last week against USC. And so, you have Luke Altmeyer now, who's playing the best he's ever played, and in his third year as quarterback of the Illini. Purdue is absolutely a better team than last year, but I would argue that maybe so is Illinois.
So last week, Purdue, they're on that bye week, but the week before that against Notre Dame, like I said, they put up 30 points, but that defense, they didn't look good. And then Notre Dame, obviously, they beat Arkansas to the point where they have to fire their head coach. So maybe that's Notre Dame's offense is really legit. Their defense kind of struggles a little bit. But the takeaway going into the bye week was that Purdue, they need to really fix that defense, get that defense refreshed going into Illinois. Because last year we saw a shootout. We know that Luke Altmeyer and that Illinois offense, they're not going to take any days off. They're not going to let up against Purdue. So for Illinois, kind of going onto that side of things, we see that Purdue, they're focusing on that defense. Going into USC, what did Illinois need to fix in order to get that victory? And what do you think following that victory Illinois needs to do? Where do they need to continue to improve if they want to beat Purdue at Ross-Ade?
Yeah, no, great question. It really starts at the offensive line. That's been the Achilles heel of this team the entire first 4 weeks. We saw hints of not just flat out not being very good against Western Illinois in our first game against Duke. Duke had their way with that offensive line in the first half of our game. So did Western Michigan. And then Indiana just kind of jumped all over it to make it noticeable to the rest of the country. And the thing is, Nick, like Illinois fans know, for some reason, our offensive line has started off very slow. I feel like I've had this exact conversation the last 2 seasons as well, which is, of course, a horrible thing. But the positive spin is about halfway through the season, Illinois, the last 2 years, figured it out. And all of a sudden that offensive lineman adjustments that they tended to make worked out. And they ended up being one of the better offensive lines in the entire conference by the end of the year. Now, is that what took place against USC? Were the adjustments made there? And now what we saw at USC is going to be how they play moving forward? If that's the case, between our skill players, our quarterback, and a very stout offensive line, we have one of the best offenses in the entire conference. But there's also that chance that maybe that USC game was just an emotional bounce back, and we kind of revert back to what we look like in the previous 4 games, and then they're going to be in trouble. But as long as the offensive line, can place average to above average, then the focus is going to be on the defense. And I don't know if it's any particular players as much. Obviously, 63-10 against Indiana does not sound great, but there's context that also matters. We lost 6 of our top 7 defensive backs that game that weren't able to finish the game. And so Indiana's a very front-running team, and so they just kept scoring. That's just what they do. All those guys on the defensive end are back now, except for one, Xavier Scott, who arguably is our best defensive back, but you saw that against USC. USC has NFL-level wide receivers, arguably the best wide receiver in the country in Lemon. And having our defensive backs back made a huge impact against USC. But our scheme is a kind of a bend, don't break type of scheme. And, it frustrates a lot of Illini fans, and I think that's very deservedly so. So I know Purdue's going to get their yardage. I know they'll probably be able to, rack up 300-400 yards, but are they going to ultimately be able to punch it into the touchdown to get 7 points? I think that's going to be key to the game, to see if Illinois' offensive line is fixed, we're going to put up 35, 40 plus points. Can Purdue keep up with that?
So we'll talk about who we expect to win this game and kind of give our predictions towards the end of the show. But one more thing I want to ask you before we talk about keys to victory in this one is, for Purdue, the last 2 games, USC and Notre Dame, those are games that there was a chance against USC that you may be able to pull something off, but those games didn't feel too achievable. So following those games, it just felt kind of refreshing that this Purdue team, they were competitive in those, and they gave you reasons to want to watch. Now, going into the month of October, Purdue fans want to start winning games. They want to see Purdue win a Big Ten conference game, and there are some winnable games in October. You play Illinois, Minnesota, Northwestern, and Rutgers. Illinois, probably the toughest game in that stretch, but still, this is going to be one where Purdue fans, they're going to feel a little bit more strong if Purdue does lose this one, especially if it's not in a great fashion. So that's kind of a Purdue expectation. For Illinois, what's the expectation going into this one? How are Illinois fans going to feel if somehow you guys go into this one and lose at Ross-Ade?
Loss would be very, very bad. Right now, it's safe to say the psyche of Illini fans is kind of fragile at the moment after that Indiana debacle. But that huge bounce back win against USC, the crowd was amazing. Big Noon was there. The Barstool folks were at Champaign at the time, and seeing that bounce back victory against USC, I think really livened the crowd up a little bit. But a loss to Purdue, essentially, all hope for a college football playoff is completely out the window at that point. And now you're really starting to question, hey, Purdue is, I'm not saying Purdue's a bad football team, but they're clearly rebuilding. And if you're losing to a team like Purdue who's rebuilding, well, then me saying earlier that the back half of our schedule is easier, well, that doesn't apply anymore because you've already shown that you can lose to a team that is in year one of a complete rebuild. So I think just the stress level definitely rises a little bit. And I think a lot of Illini fans will be anxiously waiting for basketball season to start. But if Illinois can have a nice, solid, cover the spread type of win on Saturday, I think there'll be a feeling of, hey, we're not so bad. Maybe we are back. Maybe it was just one really bad game that just happened to be on national television on Saturday night. And you're talking about a team that's 5-1 at that point with, two tough games coming up between Ohio State and Washington. But, the idea of winning 9, maybe 10 games this year still might be on the table.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about keys to victory for both these squads, how they're going to win at Ross-Ade, noon on Saturday. We got that. Stick with us here next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's, moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This past week for Purdue and for Illinois, their quarterbacks got it done. Ryan Brown, coming off a bye week, has improved at training camp, and Luke Altmeyer was able to get it done against USC in a big way. They had a positive impact on these two teams, and just like Mazda, when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you ordered, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Purdue and Illinois, just like the last segment, Ryan Brown and Luke Altmeyer got it done. At quarterback, they delivered in a big way. And for Illinois, Luke Altmeyer got it done in that huge win against USC, a big bounce back. For Ryan Brown, getting this team ready to take on the Illini. These performances weren't fluke. Altmeyer and Brown are on a streak. And just like these guys delivered for their teams, DoorDash delivers your Sundays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday. You order Stack It Up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day. Only with DoorDash.
All right, Nick, we'll start with you this time. Let's take a look at Purdue, standing 2-2 for the season, 0-1 in the Big Ten Conference. But as you said, this month provides a schedule that hopefully you're going to be able to add a couple wins on the left side of that standings. Let me ask you a question. Right now, obviously, it's a big game against Illinois, probably the toughest one that you have coming up, at least in recent schedule. What do you think are going to be the keys that Purdue needs to do and accomplish in order to come out of Ross-Ade with a win?
Yeah, absolutely, Sonny. So For Purdue, you have to limit the turnovers. You don't have the margin of error with a young team like this. So many different guys, over 70 new guys on this roster this year. You absolutely cannot turn the ball over. And we saw that for Purdue against USC. They kept it close in that game. They continued to fight. 16 points was the difference in that game. That's a 2-score game. And when you look at it, a pick six in the red zone, Purdue looking to score a touchdown, throw a long pick six that USC returns. That's the difference there. That's a 14-point swing right there in that play. Purdue absolutely cannot afford that. Ryan Brown, he's been good for Purdue this year. He was in the top 5 of Big Ten passing yards. Obviously, Purdue, they have the bye week, so it's kind of weird now where some teams have played more games than others. But he's been solid. Have to limit the turnovers. You can't beat Illinois. You can't beat a team like that if you turn the ball over. Number 2, manage Hank Beatty. For Illinois, that's y'all's receiver 1. That's Luke Altmeyer's favorite target. We saw that Indiana, they were able to limit that guy to 2 receptions. If Altmeyer can't find him, it forces him to continue to look through his reads. It continues to take more time. And then, like you said, that offensive line for Illinois, when he can't find his number 1 target, it forces them to have to block for longer. So if you're able to limit that guy, it forces Altmeyer to look in more directions. And I'm confident that Illinois' offense is worse when Beatty isn't getting involved. And then finally, my third key to victory for Purdue, it sticks with that Purdue defense that absolutely has to improve facing against Illinois. You have to make this Illini team one-dimensional. Whether that happens stopping the run game, we saw that was the key for Indiana. They stopped that run game, and it made the pass very predictable for Illinois. If you can do that, if you can make it one-dimensional, make them predictable, you have a good chance at stopping them, and you have a good chance at keeping your offense on the field. I think that's how Purdue wins this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We're kind of echo the same thoughts this segment. When it comes to Illinois, again, the first focus is going to be that offensive line. If that offensive line reverts to the way it looked like in the first 4 weeks, then Purdue absolutely has a puncher's chance in coming out victorious in this game. But if those offensive line issues are resolved, then respectfully, I think Illinois is a better football team than Purdue. And if that's the case, then Purdue is only going to win by Illinois making their own mistakes and digging their own graves. And so that's why another key for me is going to be simply don't turn the ball over, continue to get the takeaways that you've been getting against Duke and USC. But arguably, most importantly, no dumb penalties. It seems like our offensive line continually every single game has 1 or 2 or 3 penalties where the rest of us just kind of shake our head and wonder what they're thinking. When you have the better team on the field, you don't want to give the less better team an opportunity to take advantage of breaks. Because again, this is a rivalry where Purdue has taken advantage of every break that they've gotten, and they've come out on the victorious end, which leads me to my final key is those halftime adjustments. Nick, last year, Purdue scored 40 points in the second half.
Yeah.
40 points in that second half, which is what made that game so close. It was 24-3 going into halftime. And that's been kind of a common occurrence. Purdue's just been a much better second half team compared to Illinois during this, I guess you can say, losing streak that Illinois has had. So it's one of those where Brett Bielema and that coaching staff needs to be ready for everything and anything. And whatever adjustments that need to be made, be ready to make them. Because you can't take this team lightly. They've proven it. No matter how many touchdowns you might be ahead, you've got to respect the Purdue Boilermakers. You've got to respect Barry Odom, and you need to get the job done.
So I'll tell you what, Sonny, I absolutely agree. That's what Illinois has to do. But for Purdue, last year, that game was kind of an outlier. Purdue wasn't a great 4-quarter football team. There was a lot of dysfunction throughout that locker room. Ryan Walters, a guy that your program knows a whole lot about, he didn't have that team ready to play on most Saturdays, and especially not ready to play 2 full halves of football. For Barry Odom's teams, against a tough USC opponent, against a tough Notre Dame team, those two games, Purdue played all 4 quarters. Whether they were down, whether they were out, they continued to fight and drive the ball down the field, keep it a manageable ball game where you're still in it until the very end. And that's been something for Barry Odom, and especially for Purdue fans, something that's been extremely refreshing, because it was hard to watch a football team that seemingly didn't care last year. And it's so much different. Under Ryan Brown, this is a team that wants to continue to fight. And there's no doubt in my mind against Illinois, this team is going to play 4 full quarters of football and make sure that Illinois absolutely fights and doesn't take anything for granted.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Like, Illinois started off slow in their first 2 games, both against Western Illinois and Duke. Duke was, as I mentioned earlier, arguably the better team in that week 2 matchup. But they came out firing against USC. If a couple bounces didn't go their way, a referee call that we don't necessarily agree with, we could have been up 21-7 going into the second half against USC. So, again, adjustments need to be made, and I just want to make sure that this team, no matter what, never takes their foot off that gas pedal, because Purdue, as you mentioned, this is the type of win for a Purdue program that Barry Odom can kind of hang his hat on. You're probably going to end up with 4 or 5 wins for the year, maybe 6 wins or whatever. But Illinois, being ranked in the top 25, a rivalry, you're playing for a trophy. I think this is the type of win for Purdue fans that if you win this, you can kind of be happy going into next year of the positive momentum you have. And Brett Bielema needs to do his best to stamp that fire out, right? Like Purdue and Illinois, it's not just on the basketball side, but on the football side, a lot of the times we're going to be competing for the same recruits. Mm-hmm. And so we need to establish that Illinois football is on a tier above, and they'll continue to be on a tier above. And I hope Brett Bielema and the staff is going to have the players ready to do that.
I agree with you, Sonny. And let's talk Illinois versus Purdue. Let's put our predictions out there. We'll have that in the next segment. We're going scores. Who's going to win? We'll have that. Stick with us. We got it next.
Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus. Powered by Peloton IQ, it's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com.
All right, cool. All right, so me and you, we gave our keys to victory in the previous segment. This segment, I want to finish it off. I want to give our final predictions before Saturday. Battle for the Cannon. It's going to be a fun rivalry game at noon. Sonny, for Illinois, you guys had an emotional victory last week. You guys faced off against Ohio State. Next week, we talked about this being a potential trap game. You said that you think that there's too much to play for Illinois in this one. Do you still think that's the case? Do you feel like Illinois will play with that pride on Saturday?
I certainly hope so, Nick, if I'm going to be honest. I think it's going to be a tough matchup. It's certainly not one that I think that Illinois is going to easily win or cover the spread. I mean, if they did, again, that would make my life so much easier, make my Saturday watching so much more less stressful. But I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's absolutely going to be a shootout. If you're a betting man, I would sprinkle a couple pennies on the over personally, just because I think that both of these quarterbacks are going to have their ways with the defense. I am expecting with 700 plus yards combined between the two teams. But if ultimately the offensive line on the Illinois side is fixed, I think Illinois is the superior team. And I think that we're going to be able to have maybe one extra turnover or one extra stop on defense. And ultimately, the prediction I just submitted to On3 was Illini win 41-35.
Okay. All right. We have very similar score predictions. And so last year, 50-49, that's one that it's kind of a benchmark for what to expect. And it's tough because that's going to be a tough game to live up to in terms of scoring. But I absolutely believe if you're betting with our partners at FanDuel, take the over in that one, because I believe that's one of the surest bets of the weekend. This game is absolutely going to go over. Both these defense searching for an identity, both of these quarterbacks really cementing themselves as kind of dogs in the Big Ten, guys that will do anything it takes for their teams to win. For Purdue, I think this is a big one. I think this is a big one in cementing the direction that you want to go this year. This month of October is going to be very vital for Purdue. I was very high on Illinois to start this year. I thought that they had a lot of potential going into that Indiana one. I even picked Illinois over that Indiana team. They let me down in that one. Unfortunately, I think that offense, it's just going to be a little bit too strong for where Purdue's defense is. I think that Illinois' offense will be able to score more touchdowns on Purdue's defense than Purdue's offense will be able to score on Illinois' defense. However, with that being said, I still think that Purdue, they play it out all the way till the end, all 4 quarters. They keep it within 1 score. I have it 42 Illinois, 35 Purdue. Illinois nearly get that cannon this year. We'll see about next year, because I think that Purdue will definitely have a better chance at it next year. I think Illinois nearly gets it done, but I think Purdue is on a positive trajectory. But talking about a positive trajectory, we've got a couple more minutes here before we got to end out the show. I may not be able to catch you for a little bit because conference play doesn't start up till December. What's going on with Illinois basketball? Purdue, well, I'll throw my thoughts at Purdue basketball before we end it, because big year for us. But what about you guys? How's it going over there?
Yeah, I can't wait. Basketball season is right around the corner. I'm going to be in Chicago for media days next week, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to Brad Underwood, Colin Boswell, and Tomislav Ivicic. This team it's an interesting one. Illinois has had their up and downs with the way they've built their roster over the last couple seasons. This year, last year you had Will Riley and Kasper Yakushonis being the 2 best players on your team, but sometimes that can be an up and down ride when you're counting on 18-year-old freshmen, to carry that squad. This year, Brad has gone in a completely different direction. He's kind of been focusing on bringing in more veterans and more experience, not necessarily in the college level, but internationally. He's brought in guys who've played in big moments in big games in some of the toughest leagues out in Europe, and he's bringing them over stateside. So it's a season it's hard for me because a lot of this roster I have not seen before, right? So I'm kind of going on tape that I've been watching and scouting myself, but I'm excited. I do think that this year's team has more potential to go further in the tournament than last year's team. I think last year's ceiling was very high, but when you're counting, as I mentioned, on 2 18-year-olds, that you just ride the highs and lows with them, and Kasper Yakushonis was hurt at the end of the year, and the team just kind of struggled and fizzled out. This year, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case. I think they've got potential to be, arguably the second best team in the conference. We'll see how things ultimately flesh out. But Nick, let me ask you now. I mean, this year you've got everybody coming back. Mm-hmm. You've got one of the best coaches in the country. You have the best player in the country, potentially 2 All-Americans.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to ask you a question. If Matt Painter can't get it done this year, can Matt Painter get it done?
So that question's a little bit more complicated than it surface level, because everyone says that. Everyone asks that, and it's a fair question. He hasn't been able to get that national championship done. And with the talent of roster that Purdue consistently has, how good they consistently are, you would think, you kind of need that. You kind of need that for the legacy. And I see where that take comes from. But the reason that this roster is as good as it consistently is year after year after year is because of Matt Painter. He continues to bring guys in and develop them all 4 years. And in this time of college basketball where guys are jumping around and around, the one and done method, it's not a way to win anymore, because you have to have older, experienced guys, because that's the fashion. It's better for older guys that are going to be on a borderline G League roster or a fringe NBA role player to stay in college until you're 22, 23 and take that NIL money. It's a different era of college basketball, and Matt Painter is an X factor in the fact that he's able to consistently bang out these rosters that are going to be good. For this year, I think that it's championship or bust. There's no question about it. I think that Purdue absolutely needs to win for these guys, for Braden Smith, for TKR, for Fletcher Lawyer, who are seniors and who have poured out their blood, sweat, and tears for this program. And then expanding just a little bit to Braden Smith. He has the potential this year. I did an episode about it yesterday, but he has the potential for the biggest point guard year in college basketball history. There's no doubt about it. His team is the favorite to win the national championship. He's the favorite to win the National Player of the Year, and he's on pace. He needs to average about the same assists last year. He had 313 assists last year. He needs 317 this year to break the all-time assist record in college basketball. He has the potential to do all three. If he does all three, Braden Smith isn't just a legendary college basketball player. He goes in the history books. So this year is absolutely huge for Purdue, for that basketball team. And like I said, you said number 2 in the conference for Illinois. That's their ceiling for a reason, because nobody in conference play is beating this Purdue team.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. Well, it was great talking to you about this college football game. It's going to be huge. That cannon is always a fun game. I'm hoping it's a shootout. You got any last second thoughts before we end out the show today, Sonny?
No, not at all. I just think this is hopefully an entertaining game both ways. And, I'm looking forward to the match.
All right. We'll have it Sunday. Make sure you tune in. It's going to be at noon on Big Ten Network.
Saturday. I think you said Sunday.
Oh, Sunday. Saturday at noon. I'm all over the place. I believe Big Ten Network. Tune in. It'll be a fun one. Thank you for joining Sunny, and you have a great rest.